I never thought a simple security gate would change my life. I never expected it to turn my quiet suburban home into a battlefield. And I certainly never imagined that the people waging war against me would regret it so deeply. But then again, they never bothered to check who I really was. For years, the Oak Crest Homeowners Association had ruled our neighborhood with an iron fist. The power-hungry board, led by Karen Thompson and Richard Walsh, enforced absurd violations, manipulated the rules, and bullied residents into compliance. I had always ignored their petty games until the crime wave started. After 3 break-ins on our street, I installed a simple, black iron security gate to protect my daughter, Sarah. It wasn't extravagant. It wasn't out of place. It complied with every written HOA regulation. But that didn't matter to Karen. She saw it as an offense to her vision of the perfect neighborhood, and she made it her mission to tear it down. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't just another homeowner. I was Senator Nathan Mitchell, the newly appointed chair of the State Housing Committee. And when they sent bulldozers to my house to illegally demolish my property, they didn't just destroy my gate. They destroyed themselves. It started with a knock at my door. I was making dinner when I saw Karen Thompson striding up my driveway, her tennis skirt swaying with each aggressive step. "That gate has to go," she announced the moment I opened the door. "It makes the neighborhood look like a prison." I blinked at her. "Excuse me." She placed her hands on her hips, tapping her expensive running shoes against my welcome mat. "It's an eyesore. We have rules for a reason." "What's next?" "Barbed wire. Guard dogs." I sighed, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "Karen, I checked the HOA regulations before installing it. The gate is compliant." Her lips pursed. "I'm on the HOA board now, and this simply won't do." That night, I found my first violation notice taped to my gate with bright orange tape. The next morning, I caught Karen outside my house, taking photos of my property at 7 a.m. I had dealt with power-hungry bureaucrats before, but Karen's obsessive behavior felt personal. And when I started digging, I found out why. As I reviewed old HOA records, I noticed a pattern. Karen had only been appointed to the board 2 weeks ago, filling a vacancy left by someone who mysteriously moved away. Since then, she has issued violations to 5 other homeowners for absurd reasons. Unauthorized flower colors, $200 fine. Excessive bird feeders, $150 fine. Mailbox too decorative, $300 fine. She wasn't enforcing community rules. She was targeting people. And when my daughter Sarah came home from school in tears, I realized just how far she was willing to go. "Karen's daughter told everyone our house is bringing down property values," Sarah whispered. "Is that why Tommy didn't invite me to his birthday party?" My blood boiled. This wasn't just about a gate anymore. This was a power play. And if Karen wanted to play games, I was going to beat her on her own. I stayed up late that night, combing through HOA financial reports. Something was off. Right after Karen joined the board, the association began paying outrageous amounts for emergency property consultations. Who was benefiting from these contracts? I followed the paper trail and found a name that made my stomach turn. Walsh Construction. Richard Walsh, HOA president. Not only was Karen selectively targeting homeowners, but Richard was profiting from it. Fines were funneled into slush funds, used to approve unlicensed home renovations for board members. Karen's oversized pool, Richard's illegal garage expansion, they all got approved under the table. Meanwhile, people like me were harassed for nothing. At 2 a.m., a car crawled past my house for the 3rd time that evening. I peered through the blinds and saw a phone flash. Karen was in the passenger seat. They were watching me, but they didn't realize I was watching them, too. By the next morning, Karen had escalated. $100 daily fines. A petition circulated to remove my unsightly gate. Neighbors are pressured into signing or facing their own violations. Then came the anonymous text. "Remove the gate by morning or we remove it for you." I saved the message as evidence and went to bed. At 6:15 a.m., the sound of heavy machinery woke me. My daughter Sarah ran into my room, panic in her voice. "Dad, there are bulldozers outside." I bolted upright and ran downstairs. Karen stood in my driveway, phone in hand, recording as demolition crews prepared to tear down my gate. Richard Walsh stood beside her, smugly waving a court order. "Stop this right now," I shouted. Richard smirked. "We have every legal right to do this." I scanned the document. They had gone to court without notifying me, filed an emergency injunction, and declared my gate a public nuisance. I considered revealing my position right then and there. But I had spent years in politics. The timing was everything. Instead, I pulled out my phone and began recording. "Richard," I said calmly, "this injunction only mentions the gate. Why are your workers setting up equipment near my front wall?" Richard hesitated. Karen jumped in. "Oh, the wall has to go too. It's part of the same ugly security structure." Behind me, my daughter stepped forward, still in her pajamas, voice trembling but defiant. "Justice? You're destroying our home because you don't like how it looks." Karen sneered. Maybe this will teach your family about proper community standards. I clenched my fists as I watched $23,000 worth of property being destroyed. But as the sun rose, I smiled. They had made 3 critical mistakes. Improper notice. Violating my property line. Awarding contracts to Richard's own company. I looked at my daughter and squeezed her hand. Don't worry, sweetie. Sometimes you have to lose a battle to win the war. Because tomorrow wasn't just another HOA board meeting. Tomorrow, I am announcing my new position as chair of the State Housing Committee. And Karen and Richard had no idea they had just bulldozed their way into the biggest mistake of their lives. The morning after the demolition, I arrived at the state capitol with a mission. News of what had happened spread fast, and my assistant, Emily, was already waiting outside my office with a stack of files. Senator, we've received over 100 complaints about similar HOA abuses across the state, she said, placing the thick stack on my desk. Ever since your gate was taken down, people are coming forward. I flipped through the pages. Cases of selective enforcement, illegal fines, and forced demolitions just like mine. Karen and Richard thought they had destroyed a single security gate, but they had just triggered something much bigger. It was time to take this fight to the public. At the HOA board meeting that evening, I walked in with a file folder under my arm and a quiet smile on my face. The room fell silent as I took my seat in the front row, and Karen's smirk faltered when she saw the news cameras stationed outside. Richard cleared his throat, pretending not to notice the tension in the air. First order of business. Unapproved modifications. I stood. Let's discuss that. I placed a series of photos on the table, satellite images showing the 23 unapproved modifications made by HOA board members over the years, including Karen's illegal pool extension and Richard's garage expansion. Karen's face turned pale. Richard swallowed hard. Any response? I asked. Silence. I turned to the crowd of homeowners who had gathered to watch the meeting. For years, this board has abused its power. Last night, they illegally demolished my property. But this isn't just about me. This is about every single homeowner they have threatened, fined, and bullied. Whispers rippled through the crowd. People pulled out their phones, snapping photos of the evidence I had placed before them. I looked Richard in the eye. You crossed a property line when you destroyed my gate. But now, you've crossed a legal one. The doors burst open. A team of state investigators entered, led by Detective Martinez. Effective immediately, she announced. We are launching a full investigation into Oak Crest HOA and its board members for financial fraud, illegal demolitions, and abuse of power. Karen bolted from her chair. You can't do this. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, I can. Then I pressed play on the recording of Richard and Karen discussing the demolition plan in Karen's driveway the night before. The HOA had fallen. Within a month, Richard Walsh and Karen Thompson were formally charged with fraud, extortion, and unlawful property destruction. The entire HOA board was dismantled. Karen's illegal pool was ordered to be removed at her own expense. And Richard's construction company was banned from future government contracts. And as for my security gate, I rebuilt it. But this time, it wasn't just for my home. It was a symbol for every homeowner who had ever been bullied by a corrupt HOA. As I stood in front of the newly passed Homeowner Protection Act, surrounded by supporters, I thought about how a simple security gate had changed everything. The fight wasn't just about my home anymore. It was about justice. And this was only the beginning.